You kicked him out? He fought so people like you could live in peace. These words explode in a high-end Seattle restaurant where a dashing billionaire storms in to defend his grandfather, a frail veteran, and a compassionate black waitress who dared to show kindness. Welcome to A Heart of Gold, a story of courage and redemption that'll keep you glued to the end. Where are you listening from today? Drop your city in the comments and tell us, what do you think happens when one act of kindness sparks a revolution? Will love bloom amidst the chaos? Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest stories and share this video to find out. We're curious, who will you root for? Comment below, join our community, and let's dive into this unforgettable tale together. Trust us, you won't want to miss how it unfolds. The chandeliers of La Belle Étoile glittered like constellations, casting a golden glow across the dining room, where Seattle's elite sipped vintage Bordeaux and carved into plates of seared duck breast. Crystal glasses clinked, and the air hummed with the low murmur of wealth. Conversations about stock portfolios and yacht rentals weaving through the scent of truffle oil and fresh rosemary. At the heart of this orchestrated chaos moved Kiera Jackson, a 27-year-old black woman whose beauty turned heads as effortlessly as the restaurant's opulent decor. Her long, raven-black hair cascaded past her shoulders, swaying like a dark river as she glided between tables. Her black dress hugged her frame, elegant yet understated, but it was her eyes, deep, warm, and quick to catch the smallest details that made her unforgettable. Kiera didn't just serve, she commanded the room with a quiet grace, her smile disarming even the most impatient patrons. Tonight, the dinner rush was a storm. Table 9 had just sent back a glass of Pinot Noir for being too oaky. A VIP at table 12 was snapping his fingers for truffle fries, and a new server, barely 19, was fumbling with a tray of martinis, her eyes wide with panic. Kiera caught the girl's gaze and mouthed, "Breathe. You've got this." She didn't have time to linger. Table 14 needed their wine order, and a toddler at booth 3 was testing the limits of his vocal cords, his wails cutting through the jazz drifting from hidden speakers. Kiera's black heels clicked against the polished hardwood, her apron slightly creased from an earlier coffee spill, but she moved with purpose, weaving through the chaos like a dancer in a storm. She was used to this. The pressure, the demands, the way every night at La Belle Étoile felt like a performance where one misstep could cost her tips or worse. It was 8 p.m. when she saw him. He stood near the entrance, unnoticed by the host who was busy charming a group of tech executives. An elderly man, his frame slight and stooped, his gray coat frayed at the cuffs and damp from the Seattle drizzle. His white hair was thinning, plastered to his scalp, and his hands trembled as they clutched a faded scarf. His eyes, cloudy and unfocused, darted around the room as if searching for something or someone lost to time. The dog tag around his neck glinted faintly under the chandelier light, and a worn military patch on his sleeve, its threads unraveling, whispered of a war fought decades ago. No one else saw him. Diners were too busy scrolling their phones or debating the merits of the caviar amuse-bouche. The other servers were caught in the rush, and the host's laughter rang out as he led the executives to a prime table. Kiera set down a tray of martinis and crossed the room, her instincts overriding the mental checklist of orders piling up. She approached him gently, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the restaurant's hum. "Sir, are you all right?" He blinked, his gaze drifting past her before settling on her face. His lips parted, but the words came slowly, hoarse and fragile. I was supposed to meet someone. My grandson, I think." His hands fumbled with the scarf, and Kiera noticed the tremor in his fingers, the way his shoulders hunched as if the weight of years pressed down on him. Her heart twisted. He looked hungry, not just for food, but for someone to see him, to acknowledge he was still here. She glanced at the host, who was now flipping through the reservation book, oblivious. The manager, Yvonne Caldwell, was nowhere in sight, but Kiera knew her rules by heart. No handouts, no exceptions. Yvonne's voice, sharp and clipped, echoed in staff meetings. "This is a business, not a shelter." A sign in the break room reinforced it, printed in bold red letters, but Kiera couldn't walk away. Not from this man, whose eyes held a quiet plea, whose coat was too thin for the autumn chill. "Let's get you settled," she said. her tone warm but firm. She guided him to a small table in the corner, away from the prying eyes of the affluent clientele. He shuffled slowly, one hand gripping her arm for balance, his boots scuffing the floor. She helped him sit, noticing how his hands shook as he reached for the table's edge. "You look like you could use something warm," she said, offering a smile that felt like a promise. He tried to smile back, but it was faint, almost lost. "I could eat," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Kiera didn't hesitate. She crossed to the register, her fingers deftly pulling $50 from the wad of tips tucked in her apron pocket. She slipped the bills into the drawer, her movements quick but deliberate in ensuring no one could accuse her of stealing. Then she leaned toward the kitchen window where the chef, a grizzled man named Marco, was plating a rack of lamb. "Marco," she whispered, "grilled salmon, mashed potatoes, asparagus, extra sauce, for table 22. Marco raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He'd worked with Kiera long enough to know she didn't act without reason. "You covering it?" he asked, his voice low. "Already did," she replied, her eyes flicking to the corner table. She carried the plate herself, the steam rising from the salmon mingling with the scent of garlic and butter. She set it before the man, along with a glass of warm tea and a slice of crusty sourdough. He stared at the food, his hands resting on the table, as if unsure it was real. Then he looked up at her, his eyes glistening with something that wasn't quite tears but close. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice cracking. Kiera knelt slightly, meeting his gaze. "Yes, I did." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that filled the space between them. She straightened, brushing a strand of her long hair behind her ear, and turned to check on her other tables. The toddler at booth 3 had quieted. The VIP was now complaining about the fries seasoning, and the new server was still a step behind. But for a moment, none of it mattered. Kiera had seen him, and that was enough. The man picked up his fork, his movements slow, deliberate. He took a bite, and a faint smile flickered across his face, as if the warmth of the food reached deeper than his stomach. Kiera didn't know his name, didn't know his story, but she knew he'd carried a burden most of the room couldn't imagine. And in that moment, under the glittering chandeliers of La Belle Étoile, she'd given him something no menu could list: dignity. The clink of crystal and murmur of La Belle Étoile's elite diners filled the air, but a sudden hush rippled through the restaurant like a stone dropped in still water. Kiera Jackson, her long, raven-black hair catching the chandelier's glow, stood frozen mid-step, a tray of empty wine glasses balanced in her hands. The warmth she'd felt moments ago, watching the elderly veteran take his first bite of salmon, vanished as a voice, sharp and venomous, sliced through the dining room. "Jackson, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Yvonne Caldwell, the manager, stood near the bar, her arms crossed, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun that matched the cold glint in her pale blue eyes. Her tailored blazer was immaculate, but her expression was anything but. Lips curled into a smirk that promised trouble. The room's energy shifted, forks paused midair, and a woman in a pearl necklace lowered her champagne flute, her gaze darting between Kiera and Yvonne. Kiera set the tray down on a nearby stand, her movements deliberate, her face composed despite the heat rising in her chest. She turned to face Yvonne, her voice steady. "He was hungry, Yvonne. I paid for his meal myself." Yvonne's smirk widened, but there was no humor in it, only the predatory edge of someone who thrived on control. "This isn't a charity kitchen, Jackson. You don't get to play saint with my profits." Her voice rose, deliberate, carrying to every corner of the room. She stepped forward, her heels clicking like a metronome of malice. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her arms sweeping as if addressing a theater audience, "your server here thinks she can give away free meals. Want a handout? Just ask Kiera. She'll foot the bill." The restaurant fell silent, the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. A businessman at table 12 lowered his phone, his email forgotten. A couple near the window exchanged glances, their dessert forks abandoned. Kiera's cheeks burned, not with shame, but with a quiet fury that coiled in her gut. Her dark eyes locked on Yvonne's, refusing to flinch, but her heart sank as the weight of every stare settled on her. She'd seen this before, Yvonne's knack for turning small infractions into public executions. her way of reminding everyone who held the reins. At the corner table, the elderly man, Peter, though Kiera didn't yet know his name, looked up from his plate, his fork trembling in his hand. Confusion clouded his already hazy eyes, and his voice, frail but insistent, broke the silence. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said, his words shaking as he gripped the table's edge. "She was just kind." Yvonne waved him off with a flick of her wrist, as if swatting a fly. "Sir, eat your food and stay out of this." Her tone was dismissive, but her eyes never left Kiera, daring her to push back. The veteran's shoulders slumped, and he stared at his half-eaten salmon, his hands retreating to his lap. Kiera's fists clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She wanted to tell him it was okay, that he didn't need to feel guilty, but Yvonne's presence loomed like a storm cloud, demanding her attention. "He's a veteran," Kiera said, her voice low but firm, cutting through the tension. "He was hungry, confused. I did what any decent person would do." Yvonne stepped closer, her heels clicking ominously, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Decent? You don't decide what's decent here. I do, and you broke my rules." She straightened, her smirk returning as she scanned the room, feeding off the attention. "You think you're some kind of hero, Jackson? You're nothing but a server who forgot her place." The words stung, but Kiera held her ground, her long hair framing her face like a shield. She could feel the eyes of her co-workers, Marco in the kitchen, peering through the pass-through, Lila frozen mid-pour at the bar. None spoke, their silence a blade of its own. The diners watched, some with discomfort, others with morbid curiosity, as if this were a performance included with their $200 meal. Kiera's heart pounded, but she refused to let Yvonne see her crack. "Take it out of my pay," she said evenly. "Write me up, but don't make a scene out of helping someone." Yvonne's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Oh, it's a scene now, all right." She turned to the room again, her voice booming. "Let's be clear, folks. This is what happens when you think you're above the rules. You want to feed every sob story that walks in? Fine, but not on my watch." She pointed at Kiera, her finger like a loaded gun. "You're done, Jackson. Apron off. Get out." The words hit like a slap, but Kiera didn't flinch. The room seemed to hold its breath, the silence heavier than before. Lila dropped a glass at the bar, the shatter echoing like a gunshot, but no one moved to clean it up. Kiera's mind raced, 6 months of double shifts, of memorizing orders, of smiling through Yvonne's passive-aggressive notes, all unraveling in front of strangers. But what hurt most was the veteran, his head bowed, his hands clutching a napkin as if he'd caused this. Peter stood slowly, his frail frame shaking with effort. He reached into his coat, his fingers fumbling until they closed around a tarnished Silver Star medal, its edges worn but unmistakable. He held it up, his voice soft but resolute. "I fought for this country," he said, his eyes locking on Yvonne. "Lost most of my squad. This young lady showed me more respect than half the people I've met since I came home." Yvonne's eyes flicked to the medal, then back to Peter, her expression unchanged. "Save your war stories, old man," she snapped. "You and your little savior can leave together." Kiera's fury flared, but she swallowed it, her hands trembling as she untied her apron. She folded it carefully, the act grounding her, a small defiance against Yvonne's chaos. She stepped toward Peter, her voice gentle. "Sir, you don't owe me anything. Let's go." She placed a hand on his arm, guiding him toward the door, her head high despite the weight of every stare. Peter clutched his medal, his eyes misty, and whispered, "You're a good one." Yvonne's voice followed them, dripping with scorn. "Don't come crawling back, Jackson." But Kiera didn't look back. The glass doors loomed ahead, the Seattle rain visible beyond, and as she reached for the handle, Peter's voice dropped to a murmur, almost lost in the hum of the restaurant. "He'll come," he said, his words cryptic, fervent. "My boy always comes." Kiera didn't understand, but she squeezed his arm gently, her heart heavy with the cost of her kindness. The doors swung open, and the cool night air hit her face, carrying the promise of something she couldn't yet see. The Seattle rain misted the sidewalks outside La Belle Étoile, cloaking the city in a silver haze. Kiera Jackson stood under the restaurant's awning, her long, raven black hair damp at the ends, her folded apron clutched like a lifeline. The sting of Yvonne's public humiliation lingered, but it was the veteran's trembling hands, clutching his Silver Star medal, that haunted her. Peter Hargrove sat on a nearby bench, his frail frame hunched against the drizzle, his cloudy eyes fixed on the street as if willing someone to appear. Kiera's phone buzzed, a text from her coworker Lila. "That was BS. We're pissed." But the silence from her colleagues inside, as Yvonne cast her out, cut deeper than the rain's chill. She glanced at Peter, his whispered words, "He'll come. My boy always comes," echoing in her mind, cryptic and heavy with unspoken hope. Inside, the restaurant's chandeliers cast their golden glow, but the air had shifted. Diners resumed their meals, though their whispers carried a new edge, and Yvonne strutted behind the bar, her blonde bun gleaming, her smirk proclaiming victory. She snapped at a server to clear a table, her authority restored, or so she thought. The glass doors stood sentinel, reflecting the city's lights, and beyond them, the night was about to rewrite the script. A low purr cut through the drizzle, and a black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to the curb, its sleek lines slicing the mist like a blade. The engine idled, a quiet menace, and Kiera's gaze snapped to it, her breath catching. The driver's door opened, and Owen Hargrove stepped out, a 35-year-old billionaire whose presence commanded the street as effortlessly as his tailored suit hugged his athletic frame. His chiseled features were sharp under the streetlights, his green eyes blazing with a fury that made passers-by slow their steps. 3 men followed, executives in crisp suits, their faces set, their silence louder than words. Owen's gaze found Peter on the bench, and he strode over, his polished shoes splashing through puddles, his voice soft but urgent. "Grandpa, are you okay?" Peter's head lifted, his eyes clearing slightly. "Owen," he murmured, a faint smile breaking through. "This girl, she took care of me." Owen turned, noticing Kiera for the first time. Her beauty struck him, her poised stance, the fire in her dark eyes despite the rain-soaked night. But it was her quiet strength, the way she stood protective beside his grandfather, that held him. "You helped him?" he asked, his voice low, searching. Kiera nodded, her hair swaying. "He was hungry, confused. I couldn't let him walk away like that." Owen's jaw tightened, a storm brewing behind his eyes. He gave Peter's shoulder a gentle squeeze, then turned toward the restaurant, his stride purposeful, the executives trailing like a guard of honor. Kiera hesitated, but Peter's hand grazed hers. "Go," he whispered. "See it through." The glass doors swung open, and Owen Hargrove entered La Belle Étoile like a force of nature. The dining room froze. Forks halted, conversations died, and the jazz from the speakers seemed to fade under the weight of his presence. Diners recognized him instantly. The elusive owner of Hargrove Enterprises, the man whose name signed the restaurant's deeds. Yvonne Caldwell, mid-order at the bar, faltered, her smirk vanishing as she registered the fire in his eyes. She smoothed her blazer, forcing a smile that didn't reach her pale blue gaze. "Mr. Hargrove, what a surprise," she stammered. "Can I get you a table?" Owen's voice was cold, each word a blade. "You're Yvonne Caldwell, correct? The manager who just threw out my grandfather? A Silver Star recipient who fought so men like him could live in peace?" He stepped forward, his height looming, his suit impeccable but his fury raw. "And you humiliated the woman who showed him kindness?" Yvonne's face drained of color, her hands twitching at her sides. "Sir, she broke policy," she said, her voice thinner now. "She gave away food without permission." "Policy?" Owen's voice rose, carrying to every table. "My grandfather was hungry, alone, confused, and you let him stand there like he was invisible. Kiera Jackson paid for his meal with her own money, showed him the respect you couldn't muster, and you punished her for it?" His eyes swept the room, daring anyone to look away. "You shamed her in front of strangers, made a spectacle of her compassion. That's not management. That's cowardice." The silence was suffocating. A waiter dropped a spoon, the clatter echoing like thunder. Diners shifted uncomfortably, some pulling out phones, their fingers poised to capture the moment. Yvonne opened her mouth, but Owen raised a hand, silencing her. You're done, Ms. Caldwell. Clear your desk. Now. Yvonne's jaw dropped, her eyes darting for allies. But the staff stood frozen, Marco peering from the kitchen, Lila gripping a bottle of wine like a lifeline. The diners watched, some with shock, others with quiet approval. A woman in pearls whispered to her companion, her phone already recording. Yvonne's voice cracked. "This is my restaurant. It's mine," Owen cut in, his tone final, "and it deserves better." Kiera, standing just inside the doors at Peter's urging, felt the room's weight shift. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the surreal clarity of the moment. Owen turned to her, his fury softening into something else. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. "Miss Jackson," he said, his voice steady, "your compassion is what this place needs. I'd be honored if you'd stay, not as a server, but as manager of La Belle Étoile." Kiera blinked, stunned, her apron still clutched in her hands. The room seemed to tilt, the chandelier's light blurring. Peter, now at the threshold, his coat damp but his eyes bright, nodded faintly. "Say yes, girl," he said, his voice carrying a quiet pride. Kiera's throat tightened, but she met Owen's gaze, her fire kindling. "Yes," she said, her voice clear, resolute. "Thank you." A murmur rippled through the diners, some nodding, others whispering. Yvonne gathered her purse, her movements jerky, her exit ignored by the staff she'd once ruled. Kiera stood tall, her long hair framing her face, unaware that a diner's phone was already uploading the moment to the world. Outside, the rain fell harder, but inside a storm had broken, and Kiera Jackson was at its heart. The air in La Belle Étoile buzzed with a strange electricity, the chandeliers casting fractured light across the dining room as the last echoes of Owen Hargrove's confrontation with Yvonne Caldwell faded. Kiera Jackson stood near the glass doors, her long, raven-black hair catching the golden glow, her folded apron still clutched in her hands like a relic of a life she'd just left behind. The weight of Owen's offer, to become the manager of this opulent Seattle restaurant, settled over her, both exhilarating and surreal. Diners whispered, their eyes flickering between Kiera and the now empty spot where Yvonne had stood, her hurried exit marked only by the clatter of her heels. The veteran, Peter Hargrove, lingered at the threshold, his frail frame silhouetted against the rainy night, a faint smile on his weathered face as he nodded at Kiera. The room felt alive, teetering on the edge of something new. Kiera's heart raced, but she anchored herself, her dark eyes scanning the faces around her. The staff, Marco in the kitchen, Lila at the bar, watched her with a mix of awe and relief, their silence speaking louder than any applause. A woman in a velvet dress near the bar raised her glass slightly, a subtle salute, while a businessman at table 12 slipped his phone into his pocket, the video he'd recorded already uploaded to the internet. Kiera didn't know it yet, but the moment was spreading, a spark igniting beyond the restaurant's walls. She took a breath, her voice steady as she addressed Owen, whose green eyes held hers with quiet intensity. "I'll do it," she said louder this time, the words a vow to herself as much as to him. "I'll take the job." Owen's face softened, a flicker of admiration breaking through his composed exterior. "You're exactly what this place needs, Miss Jackson." He extended a hand and Kiera shook it, her grip firm despite the tremor in her fingers. The diners murmured, some clapping softly, the sound tentative but real, like rain starting to fall. Peter shuffled closer, his silver star medal tucked back into his coat, and whispered, "You've got a good heart, girl." Kiera smiled, her throat tight, and squeezed his arm gently before he stepped back into the night, the rain swallowing his shadow. Inside, the restaurant began to stir again, but it was different now. The jazz from the speakers felt warmer, the clink of glasses less hollow. Kiera set her apron on the bar, a symbolic shedding, and Lila rushed over, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Kiera, that was insane," she said, her voice low but fervent. "You're going to kill it as manager." Marco leaned through the kitchen, pass-through, his grizzled face breaking into a rare grin. "About time someone with a soul ran this place," he said, tossing a dish towel over his shoulder. Kiera laughed, the sound releasing a knot in her chest, but she felt the weight of their trust, a responsibility she hadn't sought but couldn't refuse. She moved to the manager's station, her heels clicking with purpose, and opened the scheduling book Yvonne had guarded like a sacred text. The pages were filled with passive-aggressive notes, threats of cut hours scrawled in red ink. Kiera's jaw tightened. She'd seen Yvonne's tactics, pitting servers against each other, dangling shifts like carrots, but she hadn't realized how deep the damage ran. She closed the book, her mind already racing with changes. Fair schedules, a team that felt like family, a restaurant where kindness wasn't a liability. She glanced at the diners, some watching her openly now, and realized La Belle Étoile wasn't just a workplace. It was a stage, and she was rewriting the script. By morning, the video had gone viral. A diner's grainy footage, Owen's commanding presence, Yvonne's stunned exit, Kiera's quiet strength, spread across social media like wildfire. Comments flooded in. Kiera Jackson is a queen. That owner's got class. This is why I believe in people. La Belle Étoile's phone rang non-stop, not with cancellations but with reservations. People drawn not by the menu, but by the story of a woman who'd stood for something. Kiera arrived at the restaurant early, her hair pulled into a sleek bun, her black blazer borrowed from a friend until she could afford her own. The staff greeted her with nods and shy smiles, a camaraderie forming in Yvonne's absence. She gathered them before opening, her voice calm but firm. "This place is ours now," she said, standing where Yvonne once had. "We're not just serving food. We're creating something people remember. No more fear, no more games. We lift each other." The servers exchanged glances, their shoulders relaxing, and Marco clapped from the back, his approval a low rumble. Kiera introduced her first change, a discreet fund, seated with her tips to cover meals for those in need. No questions asked. "Kindness doesn't need permission," she said, and Lila's eyes glistened, her nod fierce. As the day unfolded, Kiera took to her role with a natural ease, redirecting deliveries, soothing a fussy patron, and training a new server with patience Yvonne had never shown. The restaurant hummed, its atmosphere lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. Diners lingered, some leaving notes with their bills. "Thank you for what you did. You're an inspiration." Kiera tucked them into her pocket, her heart swelling, but her focus unwavering. Owen visited that evening, his suit traded for a crisp sweater, his presence less commanding, but no less striking. He lingered at the bar, nursing a coffee as Kiera closed out the register. "You've changed this place already," he said, his voice low, his eyes tracing her movements. "It's not just a restaurant anymore. It feels alive." Kiera tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her smile soft. "I just want people to feel seen." She paused, meeting his gaze, a spark of something unspoken passing between them. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Owen leaned closer, his tone earnest. "I'd like to know you better, Kiera, if you're open to it." Her heart skipped, but she held his gaze, her voice steady. "I'd like that." The words were simple, but they carried a promise, a door cracking open to something new. Owen smiled, a rare warmth breaking through his polished exterior, and left with a nod, the bell above the door chiming softly. As Kiera locked up, the city lights glittered beyond the glass, and she felt a shift within her. She wasn't just a server anymore, nor just a manager. She was a woman carving a path, her compassion a beacon in a world that often looked away. The viral video, the reservations, the notes, they were ripples of a single act, proof that kindness could reshape more than a moment. She stepped into the night, her blazer a little too big but her resolve perfectly fitted, ready to lead La Belle Étoile into a new dawn. The Seattle dusk painted the sky in hues of amber and indigo, its glow filtering through the tall windows of La Belle Étoile, where the dining room hummed with a warmth that hadn't existed a week ago. Kiera Jackson, her long raven black hair now tied in a loose braid, moved through the restaurant with a quiet authority, her tailored blazer fitting her like a second skin. As the new manager, she transformed the space, not with grand gestures, but with small, deliberate choices. A server's schedule adjusted to accommodate a sick child, a handwritten note thanking a busboy for his extra hours, a discreet fund ensuring no one left hungry. Tonight, the chandeliers gleamed softer, the jazz from the speakers felt like a heartbeat, and the diners, locals and newcomers alike, lingered, drawn by a story that had become legend. Kiera paused at the host stand, reviewing the evening's reservations, which had doubled since the viral video of her stand against Yvonne Caldwell spread. Social media buzzed with praise. Kiera Jackson's heart is gold. La Belle Étoile is more than a restaurant now. Comments poured in from across the globe, some calling her a hero, others vowing to visit just to shake her hand. Kiera didn't read them. She was too busy training a new server, her voice patient as she explained the wine list. But the notes left with tips, scrawled on napkins or receipt backs, found their way into her pocket. You reminded me to be kind. Keep shining. Each one was a spark, fueling her resolve to make this place a haven, not just a business. The bell above the door chimed and Peter Hargrove shuffled in, his gray coat cleaner now, his Silver Star medal tucked beneath his scarf. He'd become a regular, always claiming the same corner table, always with a paper cup of tea and a crossword he rarely solved. Kiera smiled, crossing to greet him. Evening, Mr. Hargrove, she said, setting a fresh slice of sourdough beside his tea. How's that puzzle treating you? Peter's eyes crinkled, a warmth breaking through his weathered face. It's winning, he said, his voice stronger than before. But you're doing better than I, girl. This place, it's got soul now. He gestured to the room where a family laughed over dessert, a couple clinked glasses, and a lone diner tipped his server with a grin. Kiera's chest tightened, not with pride but with gratitude. She'd given Peter a meal when he needed it most, and he'd given her something greater, a chance to be seen. She sat with him for a moment, a rare pause in her busy night. You did more than feed me, Peter said, his hands steady around his cup. You reminded me I'm not invisible. Most folks look right through me. His gaze drifted to the window where the city lights flickered. I carried that medal for years, thinking it meant something. You made it mean something again. Kiera's throat caught, but she smiled. You're not invisible, Mr. Hargrove. Not to me. She squeezed his hand, her touch gentle but firm, and stood as a server signaled for her attention. Peter watched her go, his crossword forgotten, a quiet pride in his eyes. The restaurant wasn't the only thing changing. Kiera's connection with Owen Hargrove, the billionaire who'd turned her world upside down, was deepening, rooted in mutual respect. Their first date, a week ago at a taco stand far from La Belle Étoile's elegance, had been a revelation. Laughter over greasy al pastor, stories of his childhood with Peter, her dreams of a life that mattered. Tonight, Owen slipped in just before closing, his sweater casual but his presence magnetic. He leaned against the bar, watching Kiera direct the staff with a mix of grace and steel. You're a natural, he said, his green eyes catching hers. This place is yours now. Kiera tucked a stray hair behind her ear, her smile wry. It's ours, the staff, the diners. They're why it works. She handed a server a corrected order, her movements fluid, then turned back to Owen. But you gave me the chance. I don't take that lightly. Owen's voice softened, a rare vulnerability surfacing. I'd like to keep seeing you, Kiera. Not just here. You're different. His words hung between them, sincere, unguarded. Kiera's heart skipped, but she met his gaze, her honesty rising. I'd like that too. The promise was quiet, but it carried the weight of possibility, a new chapter unfolding. As the last diners left, Kiera locked the register, the staff's chatter fading as they finished their tasks. The viral video had sparked a movement. Locals left extra tips for veterans' meals, a nearby bakery donated pastries for Kiera's fund, and a veterans group sent a letter thanking her for honoring Peter. She kept the letter on her desk, its words a reminder of why she stayed. But it was the small moments that grounded her. Lila's shy thank you for a fair schedule, Marco's nod when she praised his risotto, a diner's child drawing her a picture of a smiling waitress with long black hair. Closing time brought a hush, the dining room empty save for Peter, still at his table, and Owen lingering by the bar. Kiera joined Peter, the city lights casting shadows through the windows. You ever think one choice could change everything? She asked, her voice soft, reflective. Peter chuckled, a dry, knowing sound. Every day, girl. You gave me a meal, but you gave the city a mirror. They're looking at themselves now. He tapped his teacup, his eyes bright. You stirred something big. Kiera didn't know the half of it. Online, the video had millions of views with comments like Kiera's, "Why I believe in people," and "What if we were all like her?" A local news outlet ran a story. Waitress's kindness sparks change at Seattle restaurant. But Kiera wasn't chasing fame. She was building something real, brick by brick, choice by choice. As she locked the doors, Owen at her side, the rain had stopped, leaving the city sparkling. Peter waved from the sidewalk, his coat buttoned tight, and Kiera waved back, her braids swaying. She stepped into the night, Owen's hand brushing hers, and felt a truth settle in her bones. She hadn't sought to change the world, only to see it. And in that clarity, she'd build a legacy, not of grandeur, but of kindness, a light that would outshine even the brightest chandeliers. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey with a heart of gold. Kiera's story reminds us that one small act of kindness can spark a revolution. What moved you most? Was it her courage, Peter's quiet strength, or the spark between Kiera and Owen? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button to catch our latest tales of everyday heroes and share this video to spread the love. Your support keeps these stories alive, so let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep shining your light, and we'll see you in the next video.